So, how do you ensure your talent teams are feeding into your company strategy? So, Matthias, we'll start with you.
hmm For me, it's always the conversation that you need to have with C-level and with the right leaders in the organization. Now, like understanding what are their problems at the minute. And I don't want to talk about revenue growth right away, but I think first of all, start with a bigger picture and say like, what keeps you up at night? What are your problems? Why are you not achieving your strategy, your tactics, your objectives in that way? What is hindering you there? And then if you identify this a bit better and say, look, maybe there are topics where we can help out. So for example, instead of just hiring for roles, look at the org design and say maybe in the setup that we have right now, we're setting people up for failure because the way we have thought about this is not really helpful. Or from the internal perspective, I just had a conversation this morning with my CEO where we said, look, in the end of the day, maybe even investing in our existing talents, yeah, is maybe a better investment than just go straight away out for like a full-time role or hiring, right? But be more mindful about what are we actually doing, what creates impact is something that is very important, and to be part of those conversations and then direct the leadership on the executives in the right direction is something that is key. Yeah, and this is something where I would say it's not just on paper with goal settings and everything else. It's the constant conversation and the policies that you create and the message and the idea you spread and the way you influence people in order to create impact, because then you can actually show the variety of skills that you have, you and your team, in order to actually contribute to the company strategy.
Yeah, great point. Annie, what about you?
Yeah, I guess a couple of things. So, yeah, I think obviously, as Matthias alluded to, I think sort of TA leads and heads of TA should be working very, very closely to the C-suite, understanding the business like product roadmap, what are the big priorities for the business, and then using that to prioritize where you hire and when you hire, what are the most important roles. I think employer branding as well is a really important link there. I think we're going through a really interesting shift at the moment as a business, going from being known as like a consumer fintech, trying to almost rebrand as like an AI first company. And employer branding has a huge role to play in that shift as well. So not only in the way that the kind of recruiters talk about the business, but also how we interact with candidates as well, and the candidates that we're going after as well, fundamentally.
Yeah, no, great point. I think a massive part is transparency as well. And I think this is shifting quite drastically in startups and scale ups, where companies are now sharing a lot more kind of financials and projections than they ever did before. I know Accelerate, for example, are doing this, and it feels good to know those figures and know what you're aiming to. And I think this really helps to drive that company strategy as well. Matthias, you said something quite interesting about talent being very proactive rather than reactive to the company strategy. How do you ensure TA professionals are positioned as strategic business partners to the company rather than more service level that we've been historically? Annie?
Yeah, it's
Matthias.
Oh, sorry, was it me or
Yeah, all good.
All
good. Matthias, you go first.
Okay. Yeah, I think this is it's starting with asking the right questions, right? So why do I say this is because if we think a little bit about the time where like we accelerated and grew so fast and scale companies, I think how many of us did the due diligence of, do we need this role? What is the business case behind it? What are we actually expecting of these people after they are hired and join, when they will create impact? What kind of impact do they create? Do a better due diligence, ask the right questions, also push back. I mean, it does not mean that per default you always win every battle, right? You never, but sometimes you're heard, people will reflect on this. And I think this will help you to have the right conversations. Yeah, I think so and so many times as it was before, is like, look, if you're close to your C-level and you share a little bit the idea and you'll be the spokesperson also of, hey, look, now as a head of, or a VP or as a team lead? What is the C-level actually concerned about, and how do we find a solution that works for both sides and bridge that gap? Is sometimes, you know, where the missing link is, because you have those strategies, and so many times I saw great ideas, great strategies, but poor execution. And then what people always do is they change the idea or the strategy, which is no, we actually should have changed the execution and the way we executed the strategy. And so many times, because of those reasons, great ideas or great strategies are actually burned in that part of the organization, which is not ideal, right? So being a little bit more mindful about what are we actually trying to achieve and how do we get there, and really have those conversations, those open and mature conversations with leaders. Because in the end of the day, what I always say is, leaders, we should not look at, are you a TA leader or you are an L&D leader? Leaders are business leaders. And if you want to make this company successful, that should be our united aim. And if people put a little bit away their ego and just think about what is best for us and how can we succeed together, then I think this is really the first big step. Yeah.
Nice. And Annie, anything to add there?
Yeah, completely agree. I think it's all around building trust with the C-suite and leaders and the business partners that you're working with. Really leaning on the people team and leveraging performance data and bringing data to the table, I think, is really important. When, because I guess making it clear with the stakeholder or the VP that, you know, you're both working towards the same goals, that you want to raise the bar, you want to avoid mishires. It's not all about getting bumps on the seat, it's getting the best person in roles. So yeah, making it clear that you're both in it together, I think, is really key. And then kind of coaching them strategically using data from previous performance reviews and stuff like that to help guide those conversations.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, I like the point on data. Are there some kind of, you know, the top data points that you use to kind of tell these stories to the C-suite? Matthias, what would you say kind of the top two in your organization are?
Yeah, so we're trying to establish at the moment quality per hire as a common practice. And so what I did is I started to use a tool that is measuring this, but I didn't send it out to the management reporter right away. I watched it a little bit, saw the development, and now step by step I can see already where this is going. And now it will become part of the management report. So then all of the senior leaders and executive leaders will have a look. And then we differentiate and be a little bit more granular, because we have now a system in place where we get a quality per hire score after 3 months, as well from the hiring manager and the candidate. But again, be aware, this is biased data. So that means that if you connect it, and I'm completely with Annie, if you go connected to performance data, then you get, depending on your performance cycles, every quarter, let's say if you do it every quarter, you have every quarter more objective data points that actually then connect to a better quality per hire score. But this is something we actively work on and try to get our mind behind it, because how do we deal with biases? How do we reflect this? How do we give context to the scoring? And another one I think is still for me one of the most important ones is candidate experience. Yeah, we so many times forget this, and I think you can clearly see if a candidate experience score is really low on Medicore, that you know, there's a great opportunity to then pitch to the business and say, maybe we need to do an hiring training, maybe we need to do an interview training, maybe people don't understand how do we assess candidates properly, or have completely wrong misperceptions and expectations, right? And this really then helps to then move from this transactional role into more of a coaching and enablement role, where you help people to be better and not just finger point and say, oh, those hiring managers, oh, those interviewers, they are not doing a good job. Well, if you have never told them how to do this job well, then how could they actually improve? In the end, these are human beings, right? And the topics like that, I think, is where out of data you can create initiatives and then influence this back, and then so on, have a holistic story.
Oh, nice packed answer there. I love it.